Good morning. Today I want to talk about favorite things. Things like, do you have a favorite color? My favorite color is green. What about your favorite flavor of ice cream? My favorite flavor is licorice, but I'm pretty sure that's not your favorite. What about favorite clothes? Or what about a favorite kind of candy? We all have favorites, don't we? We have 3 sons. This is Phil, and this is Joel, and this is Andrew. And they're all very different from each other, but we don't have a favorite son. We love each of them with all of our hearts. We've seen in the stories we've been hearing that when there's favorites in families, it causes real problems. Remember in the story of Isaac and Rebekah, Rebekah's favorite son was Jacob, and Isaac's favorite son was Esau, and that just led to nothing but bitterness and jealousy. But then, when Jacob got married, he had a favorite as well. Remember, he married Leah. Well, he didn't really love her. He loved her sister, Rachel, better. And Rachel was his favorite wife. And these 2 girls were sisters. And so that led to all kinds of arguing and bitterness and jealousy because they were married to the same husband. And Jacob had a favorite. Now, Jacob, by this time, he now has 12 sons. Now, who do you think would be his favorite son? Because he had a favorite. His favorite son was Rachel's son, Joseph. And his brothers, they grew up knowing that Jacob didn't love their mothers the same way that he loved Rachel, his favorite. And they also knew that Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. He loved Joseph more than he loved them. It was obvious. It just seemed like Joseph got whatever he wanted. And they were jealous of him. Now, Jacob's sons, they had to look after all of the flocks of sheep and of goats and all of the herds they had. And so, when you go outside to do work like that with animals, you don't wear your good clothes, right? You just wear ordinary work clothes. It doesn't matter if they're going to get dirty. And these are the kind of clothes that they wore. But Jacob, he gave Joseph a different kind of robe to wear. He made Joseph a robe like this. This is like a robe for a king, not a robe for looking after flocks and herds. But he wore it, and his brothers were jealous of him. Oh, the Bible tells us that they could not say one kind word to Joseph. Now, one day, Joseph had a dream, and he went to his brothers, and he said, "You know what? I had a dream, and this is what I dreamed." He said, "I dreamt that we were out in the field gathering grain when suddenly my bundle of wheat stood straight up in the middle, and all of your bundles, they all bowed down to me." Well, Joseph's brother said, "Oh, really? So what? You're going to rule over us like some sort of a king? Is that what you're saying?" Well, and they hated him all the more because of his dreams and because of the way they talked about them. They had no kind words at all to say to Joseph. But it wasn't very long after that Joseph had another dream. And he went to them and he told them this dream. And he said, this time I had a dream that," this is Joseph in the dream, he said, "I had a dream that the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were all bowing down to me." And this time he told this dream to Jacob as well. But Jacob kind of scolded him and he said, "What kind of a dream is this? What are you saying? Are you saying that myself and your mother and your brothers are somehow going to bow down to you?" Well, as Joseph's brother got more and more jealous of him, Jacob wondered about those dreams that Joseph had. And he wondered, are those dreams from God? He wasn't sure. Now, not too long after this, he sent all of his sons up to an area just outside of Shechem to pasture the flocks. So they're down here in Hebron, but he sent them up here to Shechem, this area up here. And they were up there for quite a while. And Jacob said to Joseph, "I want you to go up there and check on them and bring back a report to me." Now, I'm wondering if Jacob was concerned because it was the area of Shechem. And remember in our last story, all of the trouble that Simeon and Levi caused in Shechem? So I wonder if Jacob is thinking, I wonder if my sons will be okay up there. So he asked Joseph to go check. Now, do you see Mom and Dad ever ask you to go and check on something? I mean, it just takes a minute to go and check on something, doesn't it? But from Hebron all the way up to Shechem, that is 80 kilometers. So Joseph isn't just going to run out there and check and come back. That's going to take a long time because he's going to have to walk 80 kilometers to get there. But he was happy to do it. Now, when he got up to this area of Shechem, he was wandering around the countryside and he couldn't find them. And somebody saw him and he said, what are you looking for? And Joseph said who he was. And he said, I'm looking for my brothers. He said, do you know where they've gone to pasture the flocks? And they said, oh yeah. Yeah, they were here, but they've gone up to Dothan now. Well, Dothan from Shechem is up here. So that's another 13 kilometers to go. But Joseph did it. He went up there to check on his brothers. Now, his brothers saw him coming from a distance because, he was wearing that robe, and that just stood out. I mean, they knew it was Joseph coming, and they said to one another, oh, here comes that dreamer. Why don't we just kill him and throw him into one of these empty cisterns around here? Now, this is what a cistern looked like. Normally, it was full of water, but there were several cisterns around there that had just dried up, so they were empty. But, they were thinking of killing him and throwing him in there because they hated him so much. And, that's what happens when sin and jealousy and bitterness it goes unchecked. It just develops into an awful kind of sin. And, Reuben, he was the oldest. This is Reuben. And he said to them, well, listen, let's not kill him. Why don't we just throw him into a cistern and just leave him there? Because, Reuben secretly thought, I'll come back later and I'll rescue Joseph out of that cistern because he didn't want to kill Joseph. And so when Joseph got near, well, they just attacked him and they ripped off his robe and they threw him down into that cistern. And then they just sat down and ate their lunch. They didn't care. They didn't care that Joseph was crying out to them and pleading to them. They just ate their lunch, and as they were eating their lunch, they looked up. And there was a caravan of camels coming their way. Now, these were Ishmaelite traders, and they were on their way to Egypt. They were carrying with them all kinds of goods to take back to Egypt, all kinds of precious things. Now, just so you know, here is Dothan, and Egypt is all the way down here right off the map. It's a completely different country. This is where they were headed. And so they saw them coming towards them and they said, hey, you know what? Why don't we just sell Joseph rather than killing him, because then we won't be responsible for his life. Why don't we just sell him to them as a slave? And so when they got near, they pulled Joseph out of the cistern and they said, listen, we've got someone here to sell to you as a slave. Now, normally a slave would go for 30 pieces of silver, but they said, we'll give you a bargain. You can have Joseph for just 20. And so they agreed. So they pulled Joseph out. They sold him for 20 pieces of silver, and they did not care. They were glad to see the end of Joseph. Now, when Reuben returned, because he had gone off to check on his flocks, when he returned to get Joseph out of the cistern, he wasn't there. He was greatly distressed because, you know, when you are the oldest son in a family, you are responsible for the well-being of everybody. He didn't know what he was going to do. But, you know, they talked about it and they said, well, this is what we'll do. Why don't we take his robe and we'll kill a goat, and then we'll just put the goat's blood on the robe, and then we'll just tell Jacob that a wild animal got him. And so they agreed. They agreed to do this terrible thing. So when they came back down to Hebron where Jacob was, they said, oh, is this robe, is this Joseph's? Jacob said, yes, it is. And they said, well, we found it. So I guess a wild animal got him and, killed him. Well, Jacob was inconsolable. That means that there was nothing anyone could say or do that would comfort Jacob. He mourned and he wept for a long time for Joseph. He had no idea that Joseph was on his way to Egypt. In this story today, it just seems like things have gone horribly wrong. There's so much trouble and so much sin. And that's what happens when we don't check our sin and make sure that we repent of it and ask God to forgive us. But even so, in the book of Romans, it says that all things work together for good to those that love God. And so although things look hopeless, we know that God has a plan. And we are going to see shortly what that plan is. Okay, see you next time.